Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today we are finally going to be talking about trinkets and domination sockets in patch 9.1, Sanctum of Domination in season 2 of Mythic Plus. I no longer have to say heading into it because the patch is indeed now live this week. And with this week, I've gotten a million questions about what trinkets are good, what trinkets are bad. Is soul letting ruby still bis? How does Tome of Insight work? Where does it drop from? How do you acquire it? And basically what is going to be the best combination of trinkets for each spec heading into the raid and Mythic Plus. Now, I have been told that most of the trinkets in Simcraft are indeed now working, so these sims should be hopefully accurate. And from what we've tested on PTR and things, they do indeed appear to be mostly accurate. Also, when it comes to domination sockets, we'll be covering those as well, talking about unholy, blood, frost bonuses, and then basically what the best or presumed best domination sockets, I guess gems you can call them, whatever, are going to be heading into Sanctum of Domination. There's also been some concern about demonology's pets not proccing the unholy bonus and things. We're going to talk about that today, and also why it's not as big of a deal as you might think it is. Any weak ORS profiles or add-ons you see here, you can indeed grab for free off my Twitch or my Discord. If you want to swing by, hang out, ask any questions anytime, feel free to do so. I also want to give a huge shout out to all my patrons. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really truly do indeed appreciate it. If you guys are interested in supporting, there should be a link somewhere up here or up here somewhere on the screen. With all that being said, let's get into the video, starting off with Trinket Sims for Destro, Demo, and Affliction. So getting into the actual sims here, I sort of want to review trinkets that are available in the raid before we start showing the results of all the sims. Now, the Terror Group drops this Tome of Monstrous Construction, which has a weird name. Either way, it's an on-use effect. It basically puts a buff on you, which you can actually see it right here, that makes your abilities have a high chance to deal shadow damage to your main target. Baseline intellect with an on-use effect, but we'll get to that. I have the Jailer drops Titanic Ocular Gland, baseline intellect, and a main stat increase when you're above half health. It reduces your main stat if you're below half health, which is probably going to be, not crazy amount of time in progression, but either way, the effect is indeed still there. Keep in mind, sims with this effect will be at permanent 100% health, so you're going to have the full effect the whole time, which is not necessarily going to be the case when it comes to actual rating. Remnant of the Azul drops you Shadowed Orb of Torment. This is another unused trinket, baseline int with a mastery buff. The mastery buff lasts 40 seconds. However, the mastery bonus has been nerfed a tremendous amount from like 700 to like 300. So it's, unfortunately, spoilers ahead, not as good as we thought it would be. A bit disappointing, but then again, not a surprise. Painsmith, Ebon Soul Vice, intellect trinket on use causes shadow damage. This does not incur or count towards Affliction's Rapture count, anything like that. Now, there is the on-use effect here. If a target dies, it leaves a shred behind you can get crit for, but this sounds similar to Ruby, but it's not, because the target doesn't have to die with Ruby. And there's a similar trinket to this that's in 9.0, Glyph of Assimilation. Where was that played? Nowhere. Moving on. So Kel'Thuzad, Forbidden Necromantic Tome. This is another big one. Baseline intellect, higher eye level, because it's from KT. The last two bosses have a higher eye level. It gives you a stack and crit bonus. Now, from what we've seen, unless this was changed, once you reach 3 stacks here, you cannot refresh at 3. It goes 1, 2, 3, and then it just falls, and you have to like proc it again and stack it again. A very strong equip-based trinket. Now, going back to the monstrous constructions, I guess tome here from Terror Group, I have it equipped right now. Number 1, keep an eye on my screen here. This is my out of combat, like just resting, whatever, I guess part of my UI. This little circle right here, you'll see it. If I get in combat, it'll change to like a cross set of swords. The same thing goes for this ruby. Watch my ruby and watch right here when I pop this, because this is supposed to be an on-use trinket. Popping it as an on-use trinket right now. Studying on this target. Doesn't put me in combat. It also doesn't incur the double on-use penalty that I had with ruby if you pop it, for example. If I pop ruby and I had another trinket on, like, let's say Imperial Ordnance or Shadow Orb, it would incur a 40-second cooldown on the other trinket. This doesn't do this, so it might say it's an on-use trinket, but this is really an equipped trinket. It's a permanent buff on you as well. If you change targets, you have to pop it again and study your new target again, which makes it pretty subpar in 2-target fights for a lot of reasons. But either way, this is an equipped trinket. It's not an on-use trinket, basically. And that's sort of like the story of Sanctum. There's a lot of strong equip-based trinkets, but the two that are on use, the Shadowed Orb and the Ebon Soul Vice, are not very good from what I've seen in Sims. With that being said, here are the actual Sims. Destruction. Destro single target. Also, please sort of ignore the overall DPS here. It's fine. I'm not simming like tier 28 eye level 900 gear. It's just my gear from retail with different trinkets on. So tome constructions, there's multiple tomes here, by the way, so my apologies. Tome of constructions, tome of insight. Now, tome of insight, you might have heard a lot about this recently. This is a bind on account item kind of trinket. The things you can buy from Korthia that cost like 1,000 Stygia that give your alts 200 eye level pieces of gear, this is one of those items. This is upgraded to rank 6. So to put it in perspective, a 200 eye level version of this beats a 233 hymnal on retail with 3 hymnal members in your group. This trinket is incredibly strong, has about a 70% uptime on the crit effect, which is pretty substantial, and it's baseline intellect. Will this get nerfed? Probably. Is it worth pursuing regardless? Probably, because if it doesn't, you're going to want one. But keep that in mind. We're looking at sims here. So scrolling down, this is a relevant trinket, but the next sim we see that does not contain Tome of Insight is actually here. This is constructions, and this is Forbidden Necromantic Tome. The KT trinket, higher eye level crit bonus and higher intellect as well. So you've got 2 equip based trinkets, and then the next combination, once again without Tome of Insight, is actually constructions and Titanic Ocular Gland. But this, remember, once again, also sims with a permanent uptime on the secondary stat increase, which you probably won't have in a progression setting or rating most of the time. Outside of that, your third highest combination, Tome and Ruby. Ruby is still here. Ruby is still very good. So if you remove most of these Tomes of Insight, it basically goes constructions and then Ocular Gland with RNG, KT trinket, and then Ruby. Ruby is solid, and depending on the fight duration, if you can get a big Ruby in and execute with a Dark Soul and the boss dies, it gains a decent bit of value. Moving on to 2 targets. Keep in mind, Tome once again has to be moved from one target to the next. It doesn't really have any secondary stat scaling potential. You see Tome of Insight and then Titanic Ocular Gland. Looking at the higher, I guess, combinations here, Tome, but you see KT trinket twice. KT, a lot of Ocular Glands, and then Ruby, Tome, Ruby, Forbidden Necromantic Tome. There's so many tomes, but at least the icons are different. So TLDR for Destro, Ruby is still a very strong option. This is a Ruby eye level, or this is a highest eye level from the Vault Ruby you can get. This is not the Valor upgrade. This is the next level. Basically, get it from the Vault. But Ruby is very high, very strong, very powerful. The KT trinket's also very strong, and then if this stays unnerfed, it'll be very strong as well. This has some sort of, I guess, a little bit of give and take with it. But one thing you see here, there's not really any Shadowed Orbs of Torment, which is a bit disappointing, but it's just the way it is. It's right here. It's a very minor gain. Unfortunately, the Mastery effect has been nerfed multiple times over and over and over, and as cool as it is, it's just not incredibly relevant in most settings. Moving on to Affliction. AF, we have a Ruby, we have a Tome of Insight, to be more specific. The highest sims here, we have Ruby. It's basically a wall of rubies followed by number 1 Insight, 2 Monstrous Constructions, Necromantic Tome. It's literally 3 tomes in a row. I swear this is going to be a headache alt tier. And then 4th, you have Titanic Ocular Gland. Now, if you're in pure single target, Monstrous, Ruby. Once again, equip, on use. Equip, on use. Equip, on use. Ruby's still very good. This is the trinket from Tazavesh. This deals more damage than most other equip-based damage proc trinkets do. It's actually not bad, and not a crazy amount behind the, I guess, highest combination in pure single target here. It's about 70 DPS, but early on, if you get this as AF and single target, you're probably going to play it. Haunt, Shadows Embrace damage modifiers, it's actually pretty substantial. You see a changeling here as well. So TLDR for AF, Ruby is still very strong. Even if Insight gets nerfed, you have constructions in single target. You have this in 2 target, which we'll get to in a minute, or Ocular Gland. 2 target, Ruby, Tome. Tome gets nerfed, other Tome. Or you have Ocular Gland. Ruby is very good for AF still. We didn't really think a whole lot would be changing, and this basically confirms that. Having your Dark Soul, your Dark Lair, your Ruby, your Soul Rot, damage amp, every 2 minutes is just incredibly strong for AF, and well, it shows here. I'm going to say these demonology sims are sort of open to interpretation. I talked to somebody who works on some of the APLs, and they don't know why it's simming like this. I don't either, but you can still pull a lot of relevant information away from this. I have 4 demo sims. Every single sim was run, okay, these 3 were all run using the same profile, less than half a minute apart from each other, and they're all very different. just demo things. Anyways, so the first sim I ran here, the DPS is a little lower than it probably should be. Number one, don't know why that is. It has Tome and Ocular Gland. Now, the similarity across all three specs here, Tome is still very good. Tome does not proc off of your pet's demonology, but spoilers ahead, getting to the domination socket section here, those don't either, like the unholy bonuses, but you still have roughly the same amount of cast, being Shadow Bolts, Demon Bolts, Hand of Gul'dan cast, as Destro or Af does. So there's not really that big of a difference here regardless. The actual breakdown in Sims when I simmed this was very, very similar to what Af and Destro did. Still a very strong option in single target, but doesn't really feed into your Tyrant's Demon Fire buff quite often, or very often. You have Ruby, you have Changeling. You have Ruby, you have Tome of Insight here. So a lot of Rubies here. Once again, you have a Shadowed Orb of Torment here with Hymnal. Once again, these sims are odd. I don't really know why they're sort of thrown off, and nobody can really figure it out either. But number one here, Tome's still good, Ruby's still good, and Insight's still good. Second demo sim. This one changes to, yeah, Insight. Still playing Constructions. Ruby's here. For some reason, Ebon Soul Vice is up here. I have no idea why. Keep in mind, this sim, and this sim were all run within a minute of each other. All using the exact same profile. Copy sim, copy sim. Don't know why it's like this. Couldn't tell you. But either way, Monstrous is still here. Number one, Insight is still there too. You do still see a good bit of Rubies here. Next sim, going from Monstrous and Tome to Ruby and Shadowed Orb. I don't know why it's like this in the first place, because double on use doesn't work anymore, and I was told this is updated to reflect that. So I don't know why it's something like this in the first place. But once again, Ruby's still up here. So is Monstrous Constructions, and so is Tome of Insight. The fourth and final demo sim that I ran, Insight and Changeling. This is why I don't sim demonology. But Ruby's still here, Tome's still here, Tome's still here, and Ocular Gland's still here. So TLDR, as far as demo's concerned, Ruby's still very solid. Insight is still very, very good, like being Tome of Insight, as long as it doesn't get nerfed. And if it does, you have options in single targets with Monstrous Constructions. You have options with technically Ocular Gland. Even the KT trinket wouldn't be that bad technically. Now, I did not sim with Emblem. I did initially, but here's the thing with Emblem, boys, is that number one, the health on Emblem has indeed been nerfed in 9.1, and number two, PvP based items have a lesser eye level in PvE, like on top of that. So Emblem, when I simmed it, was not very impressive, really, honestly, at all. TLDR, trinket wise, this tier, Ruby at a higher eye level seems very strong. I would recommend probably trying to farm these up if you want to be safe. It'll probably get nerfed. Even if it does, we have great options in single target. Tome, great in single target, and you have Ocular Gland in 2+ targets, KT trinket in 2+ targets, which should be somewhere around here, and it's pretty consistent across all three specs. And hey, technically your best single target trinket drops in the first boss, the Terror Grew, as long as sims stay the same. Not a bad spot to be in. So domination sockets are essentially the new, I guess, gimmick, tier bonus, whatever you want to call them. I know they're not tier bonuses this tier, but just cut me some slack. In 9.1 and Sanctum of Domination, they go on your helm, shoulders, chest, bracers, and belt. No other slots. This is one of the reasons why we're having the recraft legendaries. Now I can buy a helm, pair of shoulders, and a chest from the vendor on PTR. Here I am. Now there are also 3 different types of unholy sockets, or I guess domination sockets, being Unholy, Blood, and Frost, and each one has a different effect on them. For example, this one here drains 221 health from nearby enemies every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. This one here increases your speed. This one here actually gives you damaging targets, increases your damage done to them by a minor amount for 4 seconds, stacking it 3 times. Now, each shard can be upgraded 5 times. So, and the actual bonus they give will stack and become more and more powerful. So instead of this being essentially 1% when it stacks to 3, it's going to be 3% or 4. I don't know exactly what it is, but it still stacks. So Unholy, it sort of feels like Unholy, Blood, and Frost are built more towards like single target / scaling damage, tanking / DPS / healing. Some of them here do have like some carryover. It's just a random leech trait here, leech, speed, some similarities here. Incoming healing you receive is increased by 1%, and your max health is increased by 400%. Now, barring playing demonology, this is not really a DPS increase, and it's very, very minor for demo, but it's still there. A bit of a sustainability kind of, I guess, effect. And this one here just says your damage is increased by 2% when you have 50% or more health than your target. So this means essentially it's not going to become active until your target reaches essentially 49% health and you're at 100. But Once it does, a flat 2% increase that it can increase or that can be upgraded 5 times is actually not that, or it's pretty strong. That's pretty decent. So the big thing here, and here's Frost, we'll get to that too. So the big thing here is that each piece, you need to play 3 out of 5 Unholy, Frost, or Blood gems to get the actual bonus. Now, for example, the bonuses you can look at right here. Blood Shards, a Domination set bonus, gives you Blood Link. While inside the Maw or Torghast, damaging an enemy establishes a Blood Link. It pulses every 3 seconds. Basically, it's a dot you put on your target and it heals you for the damage done. Now, this does not scale with Rapture. It is, however, a decently strong option when it comes to single target, and the healing is actually sort of relevant too. It is indeed limited to 1. It does not proc on multiple targets. When you swap targets, it will indeed swap with whatever you're hitting as your main primary target, as far as, at least concerning Warlocks. The Frost one, Winds of Winter. While inside the Maw or Torghast, each time you deal critical strike, deal a critical strike, the winds accumulate 6% of that effect up to a cap of 180 per critical strike. Every 20 seconds, the winds unleash, dealing frost damage equal to the total accumulation, and surrounding you in the winds for 20 seconds, absorbing 100% of the damage dealt by the winds. So sort of like a throughput sustainability hybrid kind of effect. It's pretty cool. Unholy Shards though. Chaos Bane. While inside the Maw, your spells and abilities or Torghast have a chance to drain a soul fragment from your target, granting you 10 primary stat for 30 seconds and stacking up to 15 times. I don't know about you, but comparatively to these two, this just sounds so much better. When you reach 15 stacks, unleash Chaos Bane, dealing 1500 shadow damage near or split between enemies and granting you 300 primary stat for 15 seconds. Now, I will say the uptime on this is not incredibly high. It's somewhere in the Sims here. I think it's here. You're looking at about 2 procs per 5 minutes, give or take, but 300 primary stats, very, very strong. And at the same time, also having that stacking intellect buff at 3 stacks, 5, 10, 12, 15, that's really strong as well. It's just a passive damage increase until you proc Chaos Bane, and then it just goes to 300. It's actually really strong. And the AoE damage it brings, or I guess the explosion damage, whatever you want to call it, is pretty substantial as well. So getting into the Sims here, the big question everyone's had is, what do I want to do? What bonus do I want? And then where do I go from there with my 4th shard and 5th shard? Now, things can still be buffed, nerfed, changed, but there were a lot of undocumented changes made to these about a week ago on PTR, and, well, they've been updated as far as Sims and things are concerned. So, number 1, Affliction. Unholy, Unholy, Unholy. You can see here, Pure Blood versus Pure Unholy. It's ahead by about 32 DPS, give or take. Now, I've been told that the actual Sims in Simcraft, I think, are indeed accurate. So this is like what the blood bonus is compared to what the Unholy bonus is. The Frost bonus is actually here. So you're looking at about a 200 difference between Frost and Blood, and 230 between Frost and Unholy, however you want to split it. This is in pure single target. Now, as I mentioned, in 2 targets, Blood doesn't replicate itself. It doesn't make 2 copies. You can only hit 1 thing at a time. So while it might be a 32 DPS difference favoring Unholy in the first place here in single target, going into 2 target for Affliction, well, Unholy's ahead by 174 DPS. And I mean, depending how long the fight is, if you can proc a Chaos Bane, get the AoE and use it all, and then go to a new pack, it'll probably be ahead by a good bit more as well. Moving on to Destro, it's basically the same thing. About a 67 DPS difference between Unholy and Blood in single target. Moving on to 2 target, you see about the same, 177 DPS increase. But the big thing people have been talking about is Demonology, because Demonology pets don't proc Chaos Bane, or don't proc the Chaos Bane. They don't give stacks essentially. But the thing is, if you look at an actual sim here comparing Destro, for example, Demo, the actual raw spells cast from the player, like you being the actual player, you've got about 170 here, 180, about 210 roughly, give or take, 220, 225 give or take roughly right here. You can exclude the Imp cast, the Infernal cast. Looking at Demonology, it's about the same. We got 71, 63. It doesn't show you how many Hand of Gul'dan cast you actually have here, but I did the math. It's about 65. So you're looking at about 60, 120, 180, about 200, and then 205. It's actually very, very similar. And you can see here, Chaos Bane still procs twice for Demo. 4.4192, 2 procs for 5 minutes. And here's Destro, 4.377. 2 procs. So it's actually not as bad as it seems. Now, I will say, obviously, it would be great if Demo Pets procced it. But if Demo Pets proc this, your Imps cast basically 3 times. They all cast at the same time. You'd have so many procs, it'd be utterly insane. So, like, I get that at times things have been frustrating in the past with Drain Soul not proccing trinket effects or Imps not proccing trinket effects or whatever, but I don't think this is actually one of the scenarios where it makes a big difference, unless I'm missing something here. And if I am, feel free to let me know in the comment section, but I really don't think I am. Either way, looking at the Demonology Sims, Orc, Demonology Lock, 1 target, Unholy still ahead of Blood, even in single target. 2 target, ahead by 132 DPS. Now, this is not as big of a gap or a disparity as it was for Destro or for AF, but it's still there. So even with that being taken into account and everything, you still play Unholy. You play Unholy across the board, and that's pretty much honestly what you're going to do. Now the question is, what do you play besides that? Because these 3 are all slotted in, but you have 2 slots that are open in your belt and your bracers whenever you end up maxing them all out. Now, if you need a speed increase or a leech increase, sure, you can play this. If you need some kind of healing bonus or a higher health increase, sure, play these 2, Rev or Jazz. But for the most part, your blood shard, if you're going to play, is going to be Shard of Beck, I would assume. It's actually a substantial DPS increase when your target's below half health, mostly. And at a higher rank, this is going to be what, like 5%, 6%? It's actually going to be pretty big. Once again, as far as Frost is concerned, your damage is increased by 3% for 20 seconds after attacking an enemy you have not yet damaged. So this reminds me of Khorane a bit as far as Knife is concerned, or because like it's sort of similar to First Strike and Wild Hunt tactics and all that. Your crits cause a nearby ally to absorb damage, which, okay, if you need it, great, bit of utility, but not actual raw damage throughput, and you gain an absorb shield. So if you're looking for damage, it's pretty simple as far as I'm concerned. You go big on Holy, and you go Shard of Beck and Shard of Core. Listen, as much as I'd like to play, well, yeah, this one, 3 Unholies, Beck, and Core, with not a whole lot else to really say there. If you need throughput, healing, shielding, you can swap them out too. There's an item from Core that you can just pop a socket out and put a different one in, and you're good to go. But TLDR, it's, from what I can see and everything, it's Unholy across the board. I don't think it's very close. It has the most scaling potential in 2, 3, 4+ targets like Frost, barring it being buffed a lot, which probably needs to be. Doesn't really have, and Blood is pure single target based and even behind Unholy in the first place. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this video helped clarify what Trinkets and Domination sockets look best heading into Sanctum of Domination and I suppose Season 2 of Mythic Plus in 9.1. I don't think Tome of Insight is going to last at the power level that it currently is, but if you want to be safe, you can technically farm it in-game now. You can roll it through the BOA armor vendor from the new Korthia rep, but ranks 5 and 6 upgrade wise do indeed take, I believe, tier 6 level of rep or whatever you call it with the new faction as well. So that'll be gated a little bit, but honestly, it's still beating most max eye level trinkets at 200 eye level, which means it probably won't really last. As far as domination sockets are concerned, it's pretty much just going to be Unholy across the board from what I can see, barring them buffing Blood or Frost, or there being some fight where you just need Blood to stay alive. But if that's the case, the fight itself is probably overtuned, and I don't think that's just going to happen as looking at how raid testing and things have gone. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. I'll be sure to get back to you. Any Week Wars profiles or add-ons you see here, you can grab for free off my Twitch. If you want to swing by or my Discord, hang out, ask any questions, feel free to do so. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for the support, guys. Really, truly do appreciate it. If you're interested in looking at supporting, there should be a link somewhere up here or up here. Yeah. Thanks for watching, guys. Much love, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.